Hello, 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 hello. We're back again. It is Monday night once more, and so therefore Jim's Monday Malt Samples is back. So before I go any further, I'm going to go in and just take a quick look through the chat, because there are quite a few of you in, and I would suggest that the leverage to bring you here was probably my guest. I'm going to suggest that. And but I just want to say hello to everybody that's here. Jimmy Jazz in the early doors, Daniel Vermaas, good to see you. My friend Mark Slinger, Luna Arn, I've seen in Kilco. There was a few, and Graham Horner, good to see you, buddy. Pete Head, Frank, good to see you. Multi-mission, Benno, always here as usual. As I said, Luna Arn is in there. Whew, the chat's been Marcus Kreitner. Hello, my friend. Whiskey Pilgrim, Raddick is in as well. Lee J. Brown, Andy C. The list goes on. Gregor, Des, Alan McLaughlin, Peter Box, Steve A. PJ McRae, good to see you, Paul. So 28 of you currently. Very nice to see you all here. And without further ado, I will bring in my guest for this evening. And I would like you to all welcome Roy. I think we all know him, don't we? I mean, really, as I would introduce you, Roy, but really. If there's anybody in the room that
you have to give me the formal introduction, Jim. It's just has to be done. Nice to see you, Jim. Nice to be here.
Good to see you, my friend. And I'm just going to say Sláinte now, while I remember.
Sláinte. Cheers.
I think we all know you by now. If you don't, anybody that doesn't know Roy, this is Roy, Aqvavitae. But there's not a name in there that I don't recognise, and the only reason I know these people is through your good self. So
I think we enjoy huge overlap. I think the community watches a lot of our content, doesn't it? And there's a huge overlap in that community as well. I'm looking through there's a couple of names. Whiskey Pilgrim. There's a couple, but most of them I would recognise from
Frederick. Yeah, Frederick, the Whiskey Pilgrim from Sweden.
Fantastic.
So it's brilliant to have you on. Thank you very, very much for coming on.
I'm very happy to be here, Jim.
Breaking into your week, because I know you've actually been starting to pull things back a little now that things are starting to come back to normality a bit.
And there was that thing that I just felt that I was hogging too much of the whiskey airwaves as well, right? And it was fine to do that when I knew that people were stuck at home. But now that things are loosening up a wee bit, and to be honest with you, there's just so much content out there that I thought it was appropriate just to kind of back off a wee bit. If we end up in a situation where there's a demand for it again, then obviously I would consider coming back and doing it again. But I think, and I was running out of subject matter, if I'm honest, as well. And I think it's important to keep things fresh and keep the energy up and things. And if I was really enjoying bringing 2 VPubs a week, I really was. But I think if it went on throughout the summer and things, you could start to probably tire a wee bit. And I didn't want it. I didn't want it to be like that. I wanted it always to be good fun, right? Good fun.
I totally agree. I think coming up with because it's all right having a chat. I did one of these live streams a couple of weeks ago, a few weeks back now, with Whiskey Straight Alan McVeigh.
Yep.
And completely forgot. I was sort of so geared toward the samples that he'd sent. We were sampling a couple of Edredors, and I completely forgot to even think of a subject. We literally went into the live, and it was only when Alan was having trouble with his tech, as he tends to do. Although when he did come on, it was 100%. He started using this camera. It was 100%, and we just somebody came back later and said it was like sitting in a pub, and I was delighted because you know, that this meant more to me than, it's great to have a subject, it's great to talk to friends, but just that atmosphere basically created itself. And I think it's only an atmosphere that can happen when it's people like yourself, and it was people like me and Alan and things like that, were like-minded, but not just, I mean, it's not just a one subject, it's not a one-stop shop. You can just go off on one. And
I mean, it's whiskey. How are we ever going to tire of talking about something that fires passions like whiskey does? It's incredible. I mean, you think that you've covered all the subjects and that. I don't know if you've heard of something called Dunning-Kruger. Dunning-Kruger effect. Dunning-Kruger, part of Dunning-Kruger effect is that idea that, you know, you get into something, and because you're just in your early days of the topic or the subject or whatever it might be, whether it's a job or a hobby or something you're studying, but you in your early steps into that subject, because you don't really know it that well, you start to feel like you know it all. You know, you're kind of just a few steps in and you feel like you've covered 75, 80, 90% of it already. And then you speak to somebody who's really been in it a long time, and they're much more humble and they're much more kind of reserved, and they're not kind of saying, oh, I know lots, I'm an expert. They never say that, because the more you get into a subject, the more that you realize that you're fairly ignorant. So whiskey is always fueling me in that way. You just start to think that you've got your head around something, and then you meet somebody who just sends you off on a tangent, and you realize that you've only scratched the surface. And I think whiskey, while it's constantly connecting you and people and bringing opportunities like that for you to learn more and more with every new dram or every new event or every new person that you meet in whiskey, I think it's infinite. I don't think it's ever going to, perhaps we'll get tired of it, perhaps we'll need to have a break and come back again or whatever, but I think whiskey itself is just going to continually inspiring people. It's quite an amazing thing, I think.
It's funny, just when you said that, Charlie McLean and your interview with Charlie McLean recently just sprung to mind, because Charlie's so very subtle and relaxed, and nothing phases him.
Yeah,
you know, and I see where you're coming from there, and I totally agree too, in that I am early in what I'm doing here. And it also actually adds in a little to what I wanted to talk about tonight, or a hint of what I wanted to talk about, was living on or working on a budget and buying on a budget. Now, this is, as I said to you in the green room earlier, this is almost a Deanston 2 night for me, because at the end of April I had a Deanston night, and I had a couple of samples that Malcolm Douglas sent me, and worked my way through them, and quite a few people in, because Deanston is becoming more and more popular. And this was another reason why I wanted your good self on the night, because I know you're a bit of a fanboy.
Sure.
And there's no harm in that. And now I'm not currently on the one that I'm going to get to, but this is just the Virgin Oak that I was warming up with, because you want to start somewhere.
Yes, of course.
But it was the fact that Deanston had released recently the Kentucky Cask.
Yes.
Which, as I said, sort of caught us all a little unawares.
I've got a coloured dot on this bottle, but I've sent out a couple of blind challenges to a couple of folk, and just in case they're in watching tonight, I'll take this dot off and not give it away. But yeah, that's the Kentucky Cask matured here, which blindsided us a little bit. This actually, Julian Fernandez came on the V-Pub, and it was only just a couple of days before she came on that this popped up on my radar. And I was very surprised to discover it, because it's not this is not what we've come to expect from Deanston, actually, from all of Distell's releases. This was a step outside. Back in the day, Tobermory, Bunnahabhain, and Deanston released all their product at 40% ABV.
Mm-hmm.
And with the exception of Bunnahabhain, they were largely under the radar whiskies. Nobody was celebrating them or talking about them. But through various changes that we've covered many times, changes that were first put in at the turn of the century with Ian McMillan, on the back of the rebirth of that distillery, I suppose, from people like Billy Walker and things. I'm talking about Deanston there. But Ian McMillan, wholesale across all three distilleries, Tobermory, Bunnahabhain and Deanston, put in these changes to process, everything through fermentation, through distillation, through cask management. And obviously when it became a bottled product, how they were presenting that as well. They were presenting it unchill filtered all of a sudden. Mm-hmm. And all the official releases got a lift from 40% to 46.3. Natural colour where possible, age statement where possible. So things started to pick up. Quality started to pick up, engagement. Enthusiasts started to engage with it much more, and it started to carve a bit of a name for itself. Now, people were already fans of Bunnahabhain, but that's grown significantly in recent years as well. And then Tobermory with Tobermory and the rebranding there, a lift from 10 to 12 years helped as well. But the Leadchick side was fantastic, the peated side of Tobermory. And then suddenly, just a few weeks back, we find this. Now, this is only a Scottish release, as it turns out. It's only Scottish Morrison's branches. So it was obviously a toe in the water, I think. I'm not really sure. But this is 40% ABV. Yep. No age statement. And it's they've gone for this kind of gateway price point whiskey. So it was bizarre for me to discover that this had been launched. And I don't know how you ended up with a sample of it, but it must have been that you expressed interest in it or something and I sent it across to you.
I think it was me and Hell's Wed, actually. You were asking, we all happened to be on at the same time, and you were asking Helen and I had we tried it, and we hadn't, because Morrison's doesn't exist here in Northern Ireland or in England, which, and I see what you're saying there about a toe in the water, because it's, Distell seemed to have really, this was why I sort of, another reason why I wanted to broach this was Distell seemed to have captured a bubble. And I mean, they're even putting out and I know we were talking earlier on, and somebody has just come in here, Lee from Budget Drams, and Lee was coming to my mind earlier on, he's another guy, I'm not sure if you're aware of him, who's fairly new to YouTube. And he's reviewing whiskies below £50 and below. And I think it's because for somebody like myself, for people that are trying to work their way up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and he's hitting on drams, and Distell to me have really, really get in there the same as I say, they've found this bubble, because now that this is here, now, okay, the Virgin Oak was also a good, and it's there at your 46.3, but it couldn't have been cost effective for Deanston themselves to continue to put out something of that, even okay, it's a non-age statement, it's relatively younger, but it's still a high quality. So I'd imagine maybe they needed something just slightly below that bar, where they're putting out now this Kentucky cask. I've seen Bunnahabhain Struder constantly coming around through Sainsbury's for £25 a bottle, and it's still there doing that. That to me is ridiculously cheap for what is a good, very, very good quality. Okay, yet again, non-age statement whiskey, but it's there. You've got your black bottle, you've got your beans. To me, they've encapsulated something there for the budget drinker, but with a high quality.
Yeah.
At the same time.
Yeah.
So it was just, and it got me wondering then, and I can't, everybody else just seems so sporadic. All the other bigger ones, the Inverhouses, the Diageos, their prices are so sporadic, and you're literally going from dirt cheap entry level something which isn't great quality to something that none of us can afford or would pay for.
Yeah, I mean, there's two things, isn't there? There's kind of price point whiskies that's put out there, aggressively to bring people into a brand and to sell volume. You know, you'll hear Tomatin and Scott from Tomatin people constantly talking about their legacy, the Tomatin legacy, and how, you know, that's not the whiskey that's going to keep an enthusiast engaged for years and years, but it's a good quality whiskey at a decent price that's going to have people that are just looking for a casual, nice sipper to have at home, to drink the bottle, enjoy it, and then replace it with another bottle of the same at a fair price. You know, Legacy is in the mid-20s pounds in the UK as well. Dualcas or whatever they're calling it in the States, I think. So it's a budget whiskey. It's non-age statement, and it's crafted in a way to make it cost efficient, let's say, but to try and still put out a good quality product. And Tomatin have managed that with a Legacy time and time again. It's done quite well in blind tastings. However, you know, there's another way of looking at it as well, and that is that you know, there's been talk recently about £25 Highland Park 12, Bunnahabhain Stouratire, whatever it may be, dropping down to the early 20s, and that being too cheap. I understand that you know, there's going to be bulk purchasing happening, and you know, there will be pressure on producers to bring the margins down as low as they possibly can be to get the volume in there, in order to let producers like Tomatin do special things with their higher end malts, their lower quantities, their premium malts and things like that. And Scott at Tomatin has talked about that, how that leverages that ability for them to do that. I understand what he's saying, but I'm not sure. I would be shocked if there was no margin made on a bottle of 5, 6, 7-year-old single malt whiskey. Well, this one was £29. Excuse me, sorry about that. This one was £29. I paid for this. They're making money on this. They definitely are. This is younger whiskey. It's going out there at 40%. It's very much for a price point. So what we're looking at here is a whiskey that they're putting out there to try and encourage new people into the brand and new people into whiskey, keeping the ABV low, not too hot and spicy and peppery, keeping the price point aggressive, and making people go, oh, Deanston, you know, I've not seen that before, or whatever. Much in the same way that Tomatin Legacy has picked up a bit of a following. I think let Deanston do that if they want to do that. However, my personal opinion is that it's a dilution of the brand. They've spent years building up this zeitgeist. You talked about this bubble that they're riding on, this, and there is a zeitgeist about those distilleries now. Bunnahabhain's always had it. Tobermory's always been a wee bit in the shadow. Deanston has never had much love until recent years. Let's be honest. And they were building that brand. They were building up a fan base. Now, this is very small, this Kentucky Cask release, but suddenly they've come out with this budget whiskey at 40% ABV, which means that probably they talk about a soft chill filtration, but there's chill filtration in there. So they are kind of removing some of the elements out of the whiskey, some of the fats and the oils, in order to keep it stable on the shelf. And I think that that's not what Deanston have built their recent success on. And I think it could be a misstep. If we consider Laphroaig, sorry to hog the chat, Jim, if we think about Laphroaig, for years, everything about Laphroaig has been the 10-year-old. That 10-year-old is what you see crafted in their core range is not ever released without consideration for that 10-year-old. That is their kick the door down product for every market in the world, Laphroaig 10. It's at 40%, 43% export, so it's soft. It's the kind of legacy presentation of Scotch whiskey. But then they brought out something called Laphroaig Select. And in a lot of markets, this non-age statement version of Laphroaig was priced alongside the 10, sometimes a wee bit more expensive. In the UK, it was priced under the 10. So it was this non-age statement Laphroaig. And what we discovered with Laphroaig Select is that it was remarkably inconsistent from one bottle to the next, but it was difficult for you to find a good one, honestly. And I thought it was a disastrous thing for Laphroaig to do. I can't tell anybody what to do with their business, of course. But to me, it was just, I had no idea why they would dilute that brand with the Royal Warrant, the Lefroy 10, the one that was on prescription and prohibition and things, and then suddenly they bring out this. I mean, Lefroy 10 wasn't expensive for an Islay single malt anyway,
No.
but they bring out this non-age statement, Lefroy Select, that is not going to excite many people at all. I think it was a misstep by Lefroy, and I worry that this is a wee bit of a misstep too. Of course, everything I'm saying is from the perspective of an enthusiast as we are.
You see, this is it. And the thing is, this I'm sipping actually at the moment, the Kentucky Cask. And it's a wonderful colour, I'll say that. I do like pale whiskey, because to me it's not telling me that it's something that it isn't. It is very, I mean, comparing it even to put up against the Virgin Oak.
I mean, if this can't really rely on much Virgin Oak here at all. You can see how pale it is. If there is colour in this, it's minimal.
It's very, yet again, you said it. I'm not just saying this to agree with you for the sake of agreeing. It's lacking a lot of that Deanston thing, or anything. In fairness, it's not bad. It's not a bad entryway into something.
You can't judge this alongside Virgin Oak or Deanston 12. You have to judge this alongside Glenmorangie 10, Glenfiddich 12. In fact, even you would be throwing things in there like Tomatin Legacy, like Glenmurray Elgin Classic, the classic series from Glenmurray. The type of whiskies that you're going to find 30, 32 pounds and less down to about 20 pounds on a supermarket shelf. That's where this is pitched. So if you compare it to other Deanstons, other Distell product, I think it's weak.
No, it is.
But if you start to compare it to
the market in which it's in,
supermarket releases like the Glenmurrays and the classic series Glenmurrays and the ones mentioned, then you start to see, okay, that's kind of where it is. I think it's perfectly light, perfectly lovely and easy, but it doesn't make you want to pour another one immediately. It doesn't make you think I'll buy another bottle. From an enthusiast perspective, it's just one of these light starter whiskies, and we've got dozens of them, I think.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm getting even back to the Lefroy thing. This is almost doing the same thing, but Lefroy, this is doing something that Lefroy have already, with the Select, taken it almost too far. Whereas this is released currently in Morrison's in Scotland. It's not really available. Well, it's not available anywhere else. There'll be enough enthusiasts like myself, and once again, thank you very much for the sample of it, that'll want to know what this is like, that if they can get their hands on a ball, simply because, from my opinion, okay, I like Deanston, I like what Deanston are doing, I like what Distell are capable of. I want to try that just to see what it's like. It's not expensive. So I'm going to go and buy a bottle if I can get my hands on it, just to try it. So Distell, Deanston have got enough going on there on the shelf, because there's not too many countries in the world, I don't think, where you're going to pick up a bottle of Deanston off the shelf of a supermarket. You're going to a specialist, and it's only people like ourselves that are actually going to buy it. It's not somebody that's just walked in off the street and said, I'll have that one. Whereas Lefroy and another few, quite a few distilleries have done it, have almost taken a little too far by just this widespread thing with the Select and stuff, because at that point then word gets out, as you said, it's the price thing on that almost. It's too closely priced to the 10-year-old. And sometimes I even find the 10-year-old a little even too closely priced to the quarter cask, which I find a slightly superior whiskey yet again. You know, that it's just ramping it up that little bit more. If you keep your prices at a level there, you're not drawing people in anymore to what you're doing. You're just selling
Confusing
off. Yeah, you're just confusing and selling off weak stock.
Yeah,
as such. But you know, this was the thing. Then it gets me back to as someone on a budget. You know, is Deanston doing the if I seen Virgin Oak on a shelf as someone who now knows a little bit more and has seen this, and they are not that far apart price wise, I know what I would go for all day long, because it's not, even if I didn't know what they were, I'm just going to look at the what it says in the bottle, and that ABV would sell me alone.
Aye, I know. But it's curiosity as well. I think if you went out and you managed to get one of these Kentucky Cask Deanstons, you would buy it, you would pay the £29 or whatever it was, and I don't think you would regret buying it. You would just say, but I don't think you would run out and replace it again. Whereas Virgin Oak, you're going to want to be keen to keep a Virgin Oak or a Deanston 12 on hand, because they're really good drams, and they're priced reasonably well as well. And it's the guy that was in I forget his name, Budget Drams, Fred. No, sorry, who's the Budget Drams guy?
Lee.
So if you look at Budget Drams, and if you look at his kind of £50 or less, there's plenty to keep you interested. I have to remember my journey, probably the same as yours, Jim. When we first got into whiskey, £50 for a bottle of whiskey that would catch your breath. I mean, you really, and now it's like, yeah, it's kind of, we've been tenderized and we've softened, and we're constantly chasing the next epiphany, and it means that we've pushed the envelope probably a bit too far. Sometimes we need to keep it in check, because what's happening now, our producers, they genuinely are charging what the market will stand, rather than what makes them a reasonable margin on the product. And that's fine. That's their prerogative to do that. But it's our prerogatives to say, okay, no, I'm done with that now. I'm going to look elsewhere. If you want, I mean, I've got a kind of constant mental list of whiskey that I believe are perfect at less, I mean, all price bands, honestly. But £50, there are two obvious ones to me. Deanston are in there. There's a few other producers as well. I think Bunnahabhain 12 is always pretty decent. The Tobermory 12 is picked up quite a bit. It's quite a nice dram. Lechic 10 is amazing. But there's a bunch of other producers up and down the country doing fantastic product at that price range.
Yep.
Clynelish 14 is £45. That's a Diageo product, 46% ABV. 14-year age statement, less than £50, and it's a fantastic whiskey. Kilkerran 12 is the next back down, £30 to £40, 46% ABV, completely natural in every way, perfect presentation, mid-30s to less than £40, certainly. Under £30, we start to get into the realm of some of the whiskies we've been talking about. You can easily pick up Deanston Virgin Oak. You can pick up Glen Scotia Double Cask. Occasionally, they've brought out another one of these gateway ones called something Harbour, Campbellton Harbour or something. Their budget,
seen that.
Yeah, 40% presentation and things. They've brought that out for price. But if you go with a double cask, you're going to get something similar, a wee bit more similar. I don't mean in terms of cask style, but in terms of where it places on the shelf.
Oh, great quality.
But even £20 and below, I don't know if you can still get Aberlour 10, but that pops up occasionally. Less so in recent years, the last year or so, you're seeing less of it around. That was always £19 or thereabout. Glenmurray Classic Series, £20 and less. In fact, I've got one here. This is not a single malt, but I paid £19 for this.
I love it. It's a blended malt, and it's funny. It's it's not getting into, not bringing it down, but it's always one. My father's drink was of choice was Famous Grouse, and he passed 10 years ago, and that's one that I would always have loved to introduce him to, was Naked Grouse. Thought, I just imagine he would have loved it. So,
No doubt.
It's just good quality. If you can get good quality for that price. And it's funny you brought up the Aberlour there, that it's one that I see out there. Aberlour, and it's funny, it's one of those that creeps up and down a bit. I haven't seen it below the £25 mark for quite a while. But it's another one, back to what we were discussing earlier on, where the 12 and the 10 tend to hang around, and sometimes you'll see the 12 cheaper than the 10 here. And I would actually hold the 10 above the 12. I think it's a better dram. I don't know. It's just obviously works better for me at 10 years old than it does at 12 years old. But
I think the reason that we've been able to enjoy that in the UK is the demand for the Aberlour 10 in France. You'll know that all the Aberlour are in that kind of fatter, bell-shaped bottle now, whereas the 10 stays in that narrow bottle. And that was purely based on the volume. That was an iconic malt whiskey in France. That was France that was taking all the volume for that, I believe. So we were able to piggyback on that basically and enjoy our Aberlour 10 at a fantastic price most of the time. And you could. It was easy to knock it because it was obviously coloured, 40% presentation. I mean, we knew it was a budget gateway whiskey. Slip it in a blind lineup,
it's still good.
It would do better than you would expect it to do, depending on what else was in the lineup, of course. And it's always, especially when we're enthusiasts, and the more enthusiastic, let's say, we become, there's a danger that we forget the wonderful experiences we had with these gateway whiskies at the start of our whiskey journey. We forget it all too easily because we've gone beyond that. We're looking for different things from our malt whiskey as we move along. But I think we would all do well to give them their place, to remember what they did for us back at the start of our journey, and understand what people are getting out of them now. That are at the start of their journey. That's these experiences that these are having with whiskies that we're dismissing as gateway whiskies. These experiences that they're having are valid, and if it doesn't take much effort to remember them.
100%. Sorry, I'm just going to jump back into the chat very quickly because there's so many people have come in. David Owen, Rico, Danhart is in. Said Des was in earlier on. The chat was flying here. The Mashburn is in. Drew from AZ is in. Whiskey friend Alan, good to see you. Honestly, there's so many come in. I missed it. I'm just going to keep moving on.
Good to see you, Frank. He's suggesting that I presume when Jim is doing a review with an Aqvavitae opening, there will be a quiz at the end.
Aye, right.
Tell him, this isn't a VPub. We're not intending to do a 2 hour and a quiz at the end.
I like to keep mine short. I appreciate what you do, Roy. I really do, but I like to keep mine short because Mrs. Novice at some point will come in.
We both have to. Yes, it was difficult for me when I was doing 2 a week as well because
I'm sure
I kind of sold it originally with the idea, oh no, Thursdays will be the 2 hour thing, and the Sunday night I'll just be a quick kind of hour, just over an hour. And the Sundays I was usually able to keep it below 2, but anybody that's tuning in tonight that don't know me will probably have already picked up that I am able to talk.
Sorry, Whiskey Jason's in as well. Greg's Whiskey Guide is in as well. Sorry, just whenever I'm seeing them. But the other thing that I'm sure there was things I wanted to talk about regarding supermarket buying and I mean, because I have nothing against it. I'll still, but I think an awful lot, obviously supermarkets are one of those things that depend on where you're at. I was in Scotland 2 years ago, no, last year, and nothing. I couldn't believe it. Just walking into a corner shop as to what was on the shelf, and I've said this before. I've had complaints about it. That I mean, I can see Campbelltown from my brother's house, 40 minutes drive away from here, but yet we will never see anything from that or Isla or anything well, was to say we won't see anything from out on our shelves. Obviously, you get your Lefroy's and your Ardbegs and stuff like that. But then it goes back to this thing of the people then, the distilleries that are very, very pointed at us. As in, I'm never going to see a Kilchoman on the shelf ever. You know, I'm never going to see a Lechic on a shelf ever, because to me, these things are very, very directed at the whiskey drinker. Not a bad thing. But at the same time, obviously these guys need to know where they're going to make their money, and this is why they charge the price they do. Would I be right in saying that? That, you know?
Yeah, I mean, certainly things like Springbank, Kilchoman, you know, the days of brands like that being in a supermarket are long gone.
Mm-hmm.
So many of the whiskies that we enjoy buying and we enjoy and we rave about, we're if we've got a specialist near us, fantastic. That helps a lot. Build up a relationship with your local specialist and things. But more often than not, even if you're in a small country like the UK, you're going to rely on online deliveries. Mm-hmm. Being able to buy the nicer things either direct from a producer or through one of the bigger online delivery companies, Whiskey Exchange, Master Malt, whoever it may be. That's just the nature of it. I think if you have experience of coming to Scotland and seeing a bigger range on the supermarket shelf or in the local off license or whatever, that would make sense. But probably you're not going to be surprised by what you see there. It's going to be the same kind of brands. It's going to be the bigger brands. You might see a Macallan. You might see one of the kind of lower priced Macallans, but they're slipping away now. You're going to see the ones that we've already talked about. You might see Glenmorangies. You might see Loch Lomond. Things like that. Occasionally, you'll see a Lagavulin 16 and Ardbeg 10 something. Mm-hmm. But if you want anything that's kind of a bit more enthusiast,
you're still going to the specialist.
You're forced to kind of go to a specialist. In America, it's completely different. They've got these warehouses, massive specialists. You walk in there. I mean, some of their Total Wine and things like that. That's the size of our DIY stores.
And it's just booze.
Yeah, and they differentiate much less. Everything is mixed together. It's kind of more by brand. So, you know, the basic Glenmurrays will be alongside the higher end Glenmurrays, and you know, the cheaper Glen Scotias will be right next to the more expensive Glen Scotias. I think that's going to be the case almost everywhere. But if I went into a specialist, a whiskey specialist, I'm probably going to be surprised to find some of these kind of more budget whiskies. You wouldn't expect to pick up something like this in a specialist, right? It's different here. The specialists are there to kind of cater more for the enthusiast, I think. Or certainly they're going to sell a product based on having some kind of interaction, a conversation, and a recommendation might follow, something like that.
Because it's one of these things that it does the heart good, I find, to go in to specialist, off license, whatever, you know, you want to call it, and and that guy, that person, guy, girl, lady, whoever comes to you and says, "Can I help you with anything?" And you say, "Yes." Well, I was just looking for something, and you can get into that conversation, and they either introduce you to something that you'd never heard of, which doesn't really happen now. You know, I'm not being cocky when I say that, but you know yourself, very rarely you get to a point where they can actually surprise you with something that you hadn't heard of before, you know. But it's more just the fact that you can just talk to them. It's just somebody who has been there with you, is like-minded. You're physically talking to them and saying, "Yep." And sometimes you can steer them in a direction where they'll find that they're stalking something, because there's nothing I enjoy more than walking into a supermarket, and before I've actually got to the whiskey aisle, there's a guy in a flat cap and a shooting jacket has got there ahead of me, and he looks through the high end stuff and still walks out with a bottle of Grants, you know, and you just think, well, you know.
But I mean, what they're doing is they're not kind of analysing the whiskey. They're looking for just a drink, and they happen to enjoy whiskey as a drink. Whereas the enthusiast, we tend to we like to dwell on our dram and really kind of dive into it and things. And I think you're right when you talk about having that discussion, and it's unlikely that you're going to come across much. It does still happen, even when I go into a specialist now. That if I go into the Good Spirits Company in Glasgow, oftentimes it'll happen that they'll maybe a world whiskey, or maybe it's something an independent that is just an undisclosed distillery. They'll tell me what's likely to be there, what they feel it might be, or whatever. You have that conversation there, so you've maybe heard of it, but you've tried it. So the discussion is that their recommendation, because they get to know you and you feed back the bottles that you've really enjoyed and the ones that kind of didn't strike well with you. And they're able to kind of say, oh, there's a new independent of this out and I think you'll love it. And they become valuable. Those discussions become very valuable. And again, a lot of these whiskies, especially if it's an independent, especially if it's a special and under the radar, one of these less sexy distilleries, like one that's usually reserved for one of the big blending companies like Diageo or Pernod Ricard, you find that there's a fantastic bottling of a small vatting, a single cask, whatever it might be, presented at cask strength, no colour, no filtration whatsoever, and a good price, because it's either an undisclosed distillery or it's one of these distilleries that are not so very well known. That's where the value lies, honestly, in my experience anyway.
No, 100%. That's funny because the sort of I'm not saying I'm laughing at anybody or laughing at, but it's this idealistic dream, and I have it about Scotland, that people have about Ireland, that because of the great Irish, because of great Irish whiskies, that and the distilleries and etc. and all, that, but it doesn't make for any easier access to good quality Irish whiskey. They still sell the same rot on the shelves of the supermarkets as they sell everywhere else.
That can get infuriating, actually.
Yeah,
through distribution agreements, whatever it may be. When there's allocations go offshore and we can't get the stuff that was produced on our shores, that does get, we understand why it happens, but it doesn't
100%
swallow. It's just
I had a great conversation with Jamie Cotter, the brand ambassador for Hinch Distillery, a couple of weeks back, and we were talking about Waterford and the release of the Waterford whiskies. And I'm, like an awful lot of people, mad keen to get my hands on a bottle of one of these new bottlings of Waterford. And I'm actually seeing a name coming up here, the Wee Beastie. From Mission, and that's another one, and it's these bottlings that are made in your country, but you can't get your hands on them. And Jamie was telling me about they put that Waterford out, and it had a price. It had everything sorted out. Here's what you're retailing for. Here's what we'll sell it at. And it was selling for €70 in the south of Ireland already. By the time it got up here, it was selling for £90. Now, this wasn't secondary market. This is what it was selling for up here, if you could get your hands on it, because the duty on it had just hiked it that much over the border. And you just think to yourself, I went from being incredibly interested at €70 for a bottle to, no, well, I'm not gonna go chasing one for £90.
Releases, right?
So it just,
sorry, was that Waterford, Jim? Yeah,
that was Waterford, right? Yeah, and so these are, and as I say, it's just the same. It just infuriates me, but I do understand that it's not the distillery themselves that's creating these prices. Obviously, they're creating the RRP for them, but cross borders, etc., duty is and the branding, all these things added up is what's putting that price up and up and up to the point where it just doesn't stop. And that is the point then where me as a fan starts to switch off and just go, no, well, and you and I have discussed this before, where you just switch off and go, no, well, I'm not going to chase it.
Yeah, you're not gonna knock it or suddenly decide that it's a bad whiskey, but you're not going to be able to talk about it anymore because it's not something you can share. It's not something you can get excited about, and because it's gone out of reach, either through price, through distribution, through different marketing, going after a different market, whatever it might be, but something that doesn't connect or speak to you anymore. I mean, think of 10 years ago, 12 years ago, when Macallan basically disappeared off the shelves in Scotland with an age statement. We were left with non-age stated series of products. Now, of course, we hear all these stories about how they were overaged, and there was certainly Beyond Gold, up at Sienna and Ruby and things. That was fantastic whiskey that was in there. So what? The bottling was stripped back. There was no age. There was no information on that bottle to tell us anything that was in it. We could taste it and say, okay, this is nice whiskey. But then we discover that there are markets in the world that are going to get the 10, the 12, whatever it may be, the 18 preserved. They're still going to be able to buy the age-stated stuff. The Americas, North America, not all of North America. Canada had the same treatment as us. But then throughout Asia, they got the age statements. And that tells you chapters that they could never write on a label, doesn't it?
Yep.
So, I mean, Macallan disappeared from the bars here, disappeared from the off-license, disappeared from the specialists. It was cataclysmic, and Macallan didn't care because we were not their market anymore. We were not their market.
Yeah, because it almost begs the question. You nearly start to wonder, because I yet again, I was just looking into the brands, the bigger brands earlier on, and I start to look at them and go, well, at what point, who, and I know this has risen its head before, that you start to think, well, who is your market anymore? And Macallan are one of those, a prime example of that. And funny, another one, and it's all the same group as Highland Park, that to me just raises its head, and it's a case of you keep putting out. Who are you actually putting out for? Because people are only going to buy the £25 one off the shelf. That's really what's on offer there. That's what they'll buy. Who is it that's buying all these other ones that they keep putting out into the hundreds, into the 200s?
Well, the market's there right now. I mean, especially when it becomes these special editions, these limited ones with a story behind it, nice packaging, whatever it may be, because premium whiskey generally, and Scotch certainly, has become this thing, this boom market. My huge concern is that so many people are buying these not to open and share and drink because the prices are so prohibitive, but they're buying it as a collector's item, and it's going into a cupboard, it's going into a cabinet, it's going into a storage space of some description, and it's building up and building up. And while the prices are doing this, that's going to continue to happen. These stocks will pile and pile up and pile up. People are using their investment, and it's fantastic. The world's going a wee bit crazy for whiskey. As a community, what we have to do is detach from that a wee bit, because we're a community of drinkers. And even if we are collecting, we tend to collect a selection. Most of our bottles are not off limits. They're bottles that are put there. Oh, we might keep it sealed, but more than likely it's going to get opened at a moment in the future. And if I run into a bit of financial hardship, I can liquidate it. That kind of attitude, fine. But what's going to happen someday is all of that's going to come flowing out of these cupboards, these boxes, these storage spaces, and it's going to fill back onto a market. And it's all going to happen at the same time.
It'd be worth nothing.
Any nerves or whatever. As soon as something's going to happen, that's all going to come back on. So what I would say, if you're a member of our community, care not a jot. You don't need to worry, because if you're a drinker, as a community, we'll get together and work out where the value is, and we'll share that and evangelize about the good whiskies for the good prices. And we'll give people a wee yellow card now and again when they start to take the piss, and the price jumps like this. not because they need to make money. They're making money here
Mm-hmm.
because the market will stand this. Fine, I'm going to stop talking about this product now. Go and sell it yourself. It's not for my community anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I need to find where the value is. And at the high end, at the premium end, that collector's whiskey, if it does flow back onto the market and prices do dive, it's fantastic for us as drinkers,
Mm-hmm.
because the prices, maybe some of those products will fall back into our reach to be able to afford and open and drink.
Because we all know those people that are doing that. We all know someone who's doing that. And my question to them is, have you tried? No, but I have. And it's a case of, well, if you haven't, try it. What's the point in having it? But that's between funny. Neil, Whiskey Trials just put out a video about that in the last couple of days, about separating buyers, collectors, etc. And I think we all fit into a different group there. I like to taste whiskey. That's my prerogative. So I have a collection, but it's a drinking collection. It's my prerogative. But yet again, it's this thing where you go back to starting from the ground up. And I just watch these people that own all these really, really expensive, and it scares me sometimes as somebody who's new. And I mean, I've said this to you before, the name novice isn't just there as a tagline. It's not just that I am a whiskey novice. I don't know a lot about it yet. And it's this build up to adding in and tasting something different and trying something different. And this is yet again why I enjoy doing the sampling thing. I wouldn't think of writing a review or reviewing a whiskey based on a sample because I haven't had enough interaction with it. It's just the way I look at it. But I know other people do it slightly different. But just I like and I'm almost bringing this right back round because of I've stepped up a little and went on to the Deanston. I have this Deanston 23-year-old Oloroso matured that Malcolm Douglas sent me, and I think there's room there for everyone. And I think that certainly Distell have it right, that they're introducing really, really good quality whiskies at the cheap end of the market. And it's a very, very slow, gradual curve that they create to their higher end, which you can take at a very slow pace. If you know what I'm saying,
I know what you're saying, and I would agree. Yeah, they've got a good spread of product there. I mean, there's expensive stuff. There's a 40-year-old Deanston, close to £1,000, right? They've got a spread right through. And the other thing that they did that I thought was good as well is that they had this reputation building for their core malt product being really quite good. But there was just a confusing amount of cask finishes and different maturations coming out. Mm-hmm. And it got to the point where it kind of turned on its head, this idea of what's wrong with that whiskey that they had to finish it. That used to be, it still is a discussion that's constantly there. But when Distell were doing it, when Deanston were doing it, even Bunnahabhain, you didn't care whether it was Amontillado, you didn't care if it was Muscatel, you didn't care if it was Madeira. You knew it was going to be a damn good whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
It might not be your next favorite whiskey, but you knew you got to the stage you were confident, because what they were not doing was trying to turn average whiskey into gold. They were taking good solid whiskey and getting creative with it, and that was a good thing. It's not like that all the time, of course. You do find that there are whiskies out there that have been finished because they weren't really doing much. The cask didn't turn out to be very active or whatever. That's not a bad thing to talk about. Say the words. Mm-hmm. It's been 17 years in this refill cask, and the cask wasn't doing anything for the whiskey. We knew it was good whiskey. We knew it had potential. So we transferred it into this because we thought that would work well. Say the words, be honest. Say that. However, we knew that at Distell, the plethora of Bunnahabhain releases, some Tobermory as well, but mostly Deanston, were exciting, creative whiskies that could do amazing things. I'd never tried a whiskey from a Palo Cortado cask. Tried Deanston, then went on to try Bunnahabhain, and fantastic whiskey. You know, really, really, really nice things. Menno made a great point in the chat there, actually. And I think about this often. He said the downside of this bubble bursting is it won't be Macallan that takes the beating. It'll be the small brands. And I've kind of thought about that, you know, these big brands that are doing really well, making hay while the sun shines in this whiskey boom time that we're in right now. It is a different boom from the past, where it was kind of a fashion boom. Now it's a premium boom. It's different. But there's still fashion involved. It's very much part of the factor. And these companies doing really well and paving the way and charging the prices, they are the guardians of not only their own brand, but an entire sector, an entire drinks industry. They are the guardians of this. And if greed or foolishness or deceptiveness or shallowness gets in the way, they may survive, but they will wash away a lot of the other brands that are trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, this is the thing. And I think I always look at, and I think yet again, that we find ourselves in a situation where we tend to find ourselves settling. It almost works against itself, because you tend to find, I personally anyway, find myself settling on those distilleries that will, as you said, will go first. The Edredeurs, the Springbanks, the ones that are, and what they're doing is, because I'm putting it down to the fact that because they're such small producing things, almost, it's not craft by any means, but I mean, it's very, very focused on what they're doing to make a good quality product. Price doesn't necessarily come into it, because you can see where the effort has went in. You can taste the effort. You can taste the quality. You can taste the years of work that have went in there. And now you hope that even through what's happened recently, that stock will carry them through. I mean, obviously they're going to have stock that will carry them through. But it just saddens me that it's only us, and yet again, this sort of almost pulls it back for me, that you don't see these on the shelves, because you have to go looking for them. You know, and I would always worry that it would be the smaller distillers like that are putting out great quality product, but because there isn't enough of us to keep them afloat, at some point they go under.
I think brands like the examples you used there, Edredeur, certainly Springbank, I think they're relatively comfortable. They're masters of their own destiny now, I think. Edredeur have gone from being a nothing brand, an inconsistent gamble, honestly. In the very recent years, they've turned some of the gold that's coming out of Edredeur is really sit up and pay attention stuff. Really fantastic. Springbank, they worked out back in the late 80s that they were going to have to take control of their own destiny. They were getting out of the blend market. They were not going to produce whiskey for blends. They were going to build their own brand, and they've done it in a very belligerent way that we all love and celebrate. And I think that they'll be okay. I think where we'll struggle, I think a huge zeitgeist brand like a Daftmill will be okay. But there are lots of new whiskey distilleries out there right now that are still to put the stake in the sand, right? That have still to kind of show us what they're. So for them, it's just a case of building that brand and building that reputation and having their piece of the pie.
Yeah.
Long before it starts to shrink, and everybody starts to fight over that shrinking.
Yeah, because I know I talk about that subject quite a bit, but you go back to Irish whiskey and the amount of all these Irish distilleries that were opening up and are in the process of opening up, and yet again, some of them not even built and aren't, you know.
But right now the demand is there, but my nervousness is what you talked about, Waterford. I hope that people are buying Waterford right now and snapping it up because they really want to taste that whiskey and they want to drink it. And I hope that Waterford are doing enough to make people drink that bottle of whiskey and want to go back and buy another one. That's the biggest thing about new distilleries, because there are distilleries I've bought inaugural bottles from, and I'm kind of like, yeah, I'm going to wait till that matures a bit.
100%.
Because they're selling 3-year-old, 4-year-old whiskey. It's not there yet. It's not there yet. So, it's complex.
Oh,
again, as us, you and I, Jim, as folk that just really enjoy what whiskey does for us, is it brings people together. It brings us together, doesn't it? And then whiskey takes a wee back seat. And we can almost float above that kind of turmoil of what the whiskey industry is doing, knowing that all whiskey in some form is always going to be there. And as a community, tease out where the good stuff is for the right money. So we can be ambivalent about these things, but we're invested in it. We want to see it succeed, but we don't want to see it succeed to the point that the greed becomes a main driver. And people charge what the market will stand right across the board rather than what the product is actually worth.
100%. 100%.
But that's our job. That's what we do. That's what we do. Literally, that's why we exist. And that's why we exist independent of producers. Because we want to do it as a community. Find where the good stuff is. Where is the money?
And yet again, this is why I always appreciate, especially whenever you have head distillers, you have, people representing a brand, and what are they drinking? Somebody else's brand. I love to see that.
It's become a joke. Yeah, it's become a joke. If I say, what you're going to be drinking tonight, and they'll say, oh, and if they mention something that's inside their own portfolio, I'll say, really? What do you drink that's not on your portfolio? What do you drink that's outside of your portfolio normally? And Billy Walker was on. He drank, same as Charlie McLean, actually, interestingly, Johnny Walker Black, which it was horrible when I had the Johnny Walker Black the other night. It was bizarre. But Billy Walker declared that, he remembers Johnny Walker Black from the old days, but he still drinks it. Because what they're doing is they're not working. They're relaxed, so they just want to drink.
It's funny. This time last year, I was in Tenerife on holiday, and the only reason I know this is I came across a picture of me sitting drinking a mini bottle of Chivas, like the very basic Chivas Regal, and
which is still a 12-year-old, by the way.
Well, yet again, it takes you back to the things that these guys have all said in the situation. I was sitting on the balcony with a cigar. Well, I quit smoking 15 years ago, and I would have the odd cigar. Didn't really appreciate them that much, but I sat, smoked a cigar, drank a Chivas Regal, and I was like a pig in shit. I'm going to say I was happy as Larry. So, it doesn't have to be fantastic whiskey. The situation still drives the whiskey itself, and the ambiance, should I say, or whatever. That's what makes it, and sharing, etc. Whiskey's just a byproduct, really, isn't it?
And it's why when you get together with other whiskey folk, whiskey's still the focus. It's still the thing that's brought you together, but it kind of takes that back seat and just lets you be people and just kind of living in the moment. And what whiskey did that. It's whiskey's doing that brought us together, but it's quite happy to just kind of be another voice, sit in the background a wee bit and let the rest of us just be people and connect in it. And I think it should always be prioritized like that. So when we do get to the point where we worry about we can't afford that new release, or fear of missing out, or bottle chasing, or getting worried about the politics of whiskey, getting worried about the ever-increasing prices, we just step back and remember stories like your Chivas Regal 12 on the balcony, and whiskey is always going to be able to deliver that for us, regardless of what happens to all of these complex dynamics and tariffs and trade deals and distribution agreements. And I mean, it's all kind of, I know that my channel is founded on evangelism, this positivity, and I hate it when I find myself getting dragged down kind of negative topics for too long, because that's not what got me into whiskey. It's not what made me really happy in the whiskey bubble and the whiskey environment. So I'm always kind of trying to pull it back again to kind of put a positive spin on it. But you can't invent things. There has to be a positive thing. And we are very, very skilled as a community to dial into where that positivity is. We share it. We want to share it.
100%. Now, that being said, all my talk about affordable whiskies, shall we say, to say this is the Deanston 23-year-old Oloroso matured that Malcolm Douglas sent me.
There's a couple of those, and I think you're probably sipping a newer version. No, the 23-year-old must be the one. I've thrown away one of those on the recycled review.
Right.
The 23-year-old. But there's a newer, I think it was a 2002 that came out this year. 2002 Oloroso.
Because that's right. Because I remember seeing a few of the vintage ones. There was at least one vintage, wasn't there? The Oloroso matured.
There was a 2002, and the 23-year-old. I think it was about £150 or 140 or something. I'm not sure. But what's super interesting about it is that I enjoyed it. I thought it was a lovely whiskey. I thought it was, but I felt it was a wee. You're still sipping it, aren't you? I should leave it.
Well, no. In fairness, the first thing I got now, it's been poured a while. I had it capped. I maybe didn't get enough air at it at first. The first thing I got was real pipe tobacco, and it's obviously that Oloroso has been. I mean, it's been heavily influenced by it, to the point where it's got an old feel, an old taste, it's got an old, and it's got all that sherry thing going on,
dunnage, tan leather, that worn leather, kind of all that kind of thing. If my recollection to that whiskey was that it was like that, but it was very soft, and it was there was a flat coke element to it as well. A lot of Deanston for me has built up a fantastic portfolio based on a lovely grip and effervescence, a great prickle that we come to love as enthusiasts. We like our gums to tickle, we like a nice prickle on our palate. We like that grip, that texture. And the 23-year-old Oloroso skipped that, and that could be a lot to do with age, of course. Of course, it could just be that kind of softened thing. But we have to remember as well that 23-year-old Oloroso is from a time when Deanston was making bulk, only focused on bulk product for blends. Now, they were making still good quality whiskey. There had to be a minimum quality there. And a lot of that would have ended up in very good casks, very good bourbon casks and sherry casks. And we hope that that's what you're getting to enjoy there, one of those. But I predict that 10 years from now, when we're able to try a 23-year-old Oloroso matured Deanston from this century, it's going to have that effervescence. It's going to have that extra, whatever they've done at Deanston to lift the quality.
Yeah.
I enjoyed my time with it. I really did. And a lot of people that I know really enjoyed it, really loved it. I felt it gave me confidence to buy younger Deanston with abandon, knowing that it was. I hope
100%. And Malcolm, Malcolm, and he was very, he's another Deanston fanboy, and sent me a few of them. And one of them was that Palo Cortado, and it was just great to get the opportunity to try them. As I said to you earlier, that's what this live feed I try to do. That's what it's about. It's an opportunity for me to try samples that people are sending me and talk whiskey.
Yes,
I
think it's a good thing to do, because whenever somebody shares a sample with you, it's because they're excited about it. Yeah. And they want to share, they want to vicariously enjoy that excitement through you. They want to hear your opinion. They want to get your input on it. There's one sitting here that I'm waiting to enjoy. This is from Vlad. he's given me a Polish whiskey here, fantastic, and all these whiskies are getting shared with me. This is from Philip over in Switzerland, a Belgrove rye, and fantastical things that you would never ever happen upon. And they know that it's going to be difficult for you, and they're sharing it because they're like, I think I'd like you to enjoy it too.
So it's funny because that goes both ways.
Chance to sip that on air, and feed back to them. It's good.
I find it goes both ways too, because there's whiskies that I have disliked and told people to dislike them, and I'd happily send them a sample of it to see if I can get. And nothing makes me happier than when they agree with me.
Well, I was expecting that when that Johnny Walker Black happened on the V Pub on Thursday night when it came last. I was expecting people to say, "Oh, I don't believe you on the Johnny Walker." So I've kind of been preparing myself to send them a White and Mackay and a Johnny Walker Black, and say, "Look, take these. You try these together." Now, I was convinced that this is terrible. This is a White Mackay. It must be this. This must be the Johnny Walker. It's a bit better. No, it was the opposite way around, and it shocked me. Which is why you do that live as well.
Yeah,
because the person who's brave enough to call you out on it, to tell you that you're talking nonsense for putting a 12-year-old matured blend at the back of the pile, that probably they're a bit naive still. Maybe they're still suffering from the Dunning-Kruger thing I mentioned at the start. So you say to them, "Okay, it's fine. Let me send you these 2 wee samples." And just for no other reason than curiosity, and I fully welcome you to disagree, of course, even when you try them together. But don't criticize me for discovering what I did. It takes a lot to blind taste on a live stream. It really, really does.
Oh, I know that.
You need to know that you're not going to get it right all the time.
Yeah.
So you need to turn it around to look, it's the whiskey that's on test, not me. I'm not a blind taster, but I'll do my best.
Yeah, I've
you're made a blind challenge list, Jim. Should I add it?
Work away. I mean, I've done it. I've actually done quite a few blind challenges. I did one a few weeks ago and completely cocked it up. But it wasn't. It wasn't. I was going to say I'll make my excuses. I thought it'll make my excuses. It wasn't really my forte. It was bourbons. So I still I like bourbons, but I struggle with them a bit.
I think there's less definition probably, especially if you're drinking a lot of Scotch and Irish.
It was even
into a bourbon lineup.
Yeah, it was even the ryes. He had a couple of ryes in there, and as much as I was able to pick them out early, it fell away then, and you know yourself, you just get lost in it, and it doesn't necessarily. Sometimes you talk yourself out of it, etc.
Second guessing, and you know what happens as well. Even that's why the blind challenges that I do only have 5 drams, because even 5 is pushing it.
5's a lot. Yeah, this is the thing. There's 6, I think I did in that one.
Once you start doing this, you're all over the place. It's almost like your first pass that you don't second guess, that you make so many notes, as you spend time individually with each one and pause in between and make as much notes as you can. And then when you're confused later on in the lineup, you go back to your original notes and trust them.
Yeah.
And really, really trust them. But I have to be honest, when I started that blind challenge thing, in order to kind of send it on to channel, that the idea that a channel would nominate another channel, I hoped that what would happen is that smaller channels would benefit through a nomination from a bigger channel, for example, and that it would lift the subs and it would lift the viewership across, because people would follow the concept, and through following the concept, they would pick up other channels and things that they hadn't discovered before. So recently I've reached out. You could be on the list, actually, because I feel like I've asked you before. Did I ask? No.
I can't remember, Roy. It's just one of those things, it's possibly.
With every blind challenge I send out, I sent the last blind challenge out a long time ago to Jason in Ohio, Action Drum, and it's not arrived yet. Oh. Yeah, I'm starting to get nervous. I mean, it's not a big deal if it gets trashed or confiscated or whatever. I mean, I clearly send it out. There's nothing commercial about this whatsoever. It's a gift to him. It's a shared experience that I'm doing here. There's no monetization going on or whatever. And I'm sending out literally tiny, tiny little blind bottles. However, it's not made it there yet, so we keep our fingers crossed and hope that it gets there, and I'll redo it again and try it a second time, or get a wee mule, somebody that's flying out to the States or something to carry it along.
Sample sending is just, that's always the bit that gets me. I had one with Greg's Whiskey Guide, and it just took months. It just happened as this all kicked in, and it was more, it's the same thing. I don't care what way they reach him. I don't care. It's just because I wanted him to enjoy them. I wanted him to have them, you know. And it was one of those, and he did get them. And it was one of those things that I thought, you know, and him and I were discussing constantly. And I thought, I'll send them again if you don't get them. Because I just want you to try these whiskies, you know. And this is, yet again, you were talking about the community. I said it to you before, and I mean it. And there's people in here that I've said these things over and over again, that I've made some of the best friends I've never met through the whiskey community. And the whiskey community drew me in long before the whiskey did. And I've said that to you before. It's just the way it is. I'm not complaining.
We've got a job to do, though. We talked about the big producers being guardians of an industry. We're guardians of
the community.
Because, you know, the whiskey community that I've found, Jim, encourages me to be a better version of myself. It really does. And I like who I am in the whiskey community. Yeah. I don't necessarily like who I am outside of it, and challenging days and, life struggles and things like that. I mean, it kind of, I don't always have the patience I should have. I don't always have the wisdom, you know. But inside whiskey has taught me how to slow down and think about things, think about people, think about things from other perspectives, and kind of have much more open mind. And I think we could all do with a wee pinch of that now and again. I like that our community does seem to be populated by wonderful folk who are very kind. And it brings us into an environment that doesn't care about our politics, how we pray, we vote, how we eat, how we look, how we appear. Or it doesn't care about any of that. We're there to have a shared experience. And I think at any time in human existence, that would have been a wonderful thing. But it's certainly a wonderful thing now.
Amen. Well, listen, if you don't mind, I'm going to call it at that, because I usually try to keep these. I feel like as if I'm holding you back as it is. And look,
you're not holding me back. I think you should have a goal. We can't give them a quiz at the end, Jim, but we could have them. We can have a wee is at a Speyside.
Really? If you want.
Do
you mean I could get my revenge online on my own channel?
It could work. It could work.
Well, I'm just going. Oh, no, hold on. Because you see, sometimes I actually try to work this out before I believe it or not.
Well, why do you want to grab a bottle, or would you
tell you what? Well, I've got a selection here behind me, so I'm just gonna look at one that you can't see, and I'll be honest with it. I'm being totally honest, so I'm not gonna. I'll not hide the fact of what it is. It's the one I'm going to stick with.
Right.
So I'll let you ask me then.
Right. Okay.
This is going to be interesting.
Are you just going to do it on a piece of paper? We could do a screen share, I suppose, but.
Well, there's going to. I mean, there's. It would be incredibly awkward. I've got a bit of paper here. I'll even set a timer if you want. Many questions, right? I will certainly. I'll be totally honest with you. I will do. Oh, I've lost you.
That was my fault. That was my fault. I pulled a parachute on you, Jim. I didn't.
Are you scared?
Have you got a piece of paper there? Then yeah,
I've got a bit of paper here, and I'll just take off.
You'll just keep counting.
I'll keep tally marks.
Let's have a wee go. So you've got a whiskey in mind, right? And I have to guess it.
I have.
Is it a Speyside, Jim?
No.
Is it a Highland?
Aye.
Is it an island?
No.
Is it a lowland Highland? Is it Southern Highlands?
I'm looking for a map. That's a good question. I'm. Could you ask another one?
Okay, is it one of the big four? The big four being Grants, Edrington, Diageo, or Pernod Ricard?
That's not a good question. I don't believe so.
Sure.
Oh yes, it is actually. It is.
It is one of the big four.
Yes. I'm stupid. Aye, it is.
So is it Diageo or Pernod Ricard?
Yes.
Okay. Is it Diageo?
Yes.
So it's a Highland. How many questions have I asked?
That's 6. I have yet.
Okay. Do I get a Hurley on your show as well? Do I get that?
Well, I mean, I think it would be unfair of me not.
Okay, so it's a Highland. Is it? It's a Highland Diageo. So we've got Clynelish, we've got Dalwhinnie, we've got Oban. Because it's mainland, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of any more. Is it Oban?
No.
Is it Clynelish?
Yes.
Is it Clynelish 14?
Of course it is. You wouldn't even see me. What do I do now? Coming on here, beating me at your own game.
I know. Sorry. Aye.
Oh,
Wait,
fair.
I'll give you. Let's have another chat. You ask me. On you go. I've got one here that's within reach.
Right. Well, okay. Is it Speyside?
Nope.
Well, I'll not say what I was going to say. Is it Highland?
Nope.
Is it Lowland?
Nope.
Is it Isla?
Nope.
Is Campbelltown?
Yes.
Finally. Right, well, at least that narrows it quite a bit down. Is it owned by the Mitchell family?
Yes.
Right, so that brings it down to 4 then. Pretty much. Is it Glengyle?
Yes.
Right. It's Kilkerran then. So what's the, I have that as 7 I've asked.
Yes.
I think. Kilkerran 8.
No.
Kilkerran 12.
Yay.
Yay. Well, you still beat me, but at least it feels like some sort of win.
I think you sent a comment to say after we played on the VPub. I think you sent a comment to say I'm just going to keep coming back until I get there.
I bloody did, no. And people keep like Menno and all his every time it gets mentioned, and my name comes up, Menno gets a good laugh at it. So I do feel like as if I've redeemed myself slightly.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you for that.
You've earned yourself a sniper coin on your own show.
I think the only problem was there wasn't enough people that you're going to have to tell people that I did it. I'll just have to get whoever's in the group here to tell everybody that I did it. Listen, Roy, yet again, Thank you so much, my friend. I didn't say it earlier on, but this to me is probably a bit like you having Charlie McLean or Ralphie or somebody on. I mean, you're certainly up there in my, you know, and to have you on here,
Your
just
pals, Jim.
I know, but I sort of. I have to apologize for those in the chat that I sort of didn't get in there as much as I would like to on the night, because I was just quite happy listening to you. And you know this yourself, that you sort of get lost and just listening to what's being said. And,
Yep, absolutely. You always feel guilty about the folk that joined that you never connected with while they were here. Every time. Absolutely.
And I really do appreciate everybody in here tonight. They do every now and again. The name Guitar Flies has come up, but I didn't want to steal that. But listen, please hang around, Roy, and we'll have a wee chat in a minute. And thank you once again for being here.
You're very welcome, Jim. Thank you very much for inviting me, my friend.
Oh, you're very, very welcome.
Anytime, buddy.
Cheers. Here's to your good health.
Participating and joining in. Cheers. Good night, folks.
There we are. Yes, I do apologize, ladies and gentlemen. I do try to get in here a little more than I did tonight, but I'm sorry. I was a bit starstruck. I'll be back again. I will be back again. I may be off for a few weeks now, because there may be a little impromptu holiday coming up, but I will be back. Jim's Monday Malt Samples will return. The reviews will continue. So I would like to thank Roy once again. I really, really appreciate it. I'd like to thank Malcolm Douglas for the Deanston sample. Really enjoyed that, Malcolm. Thank you, my friend. And as I said, I will be back. Thank you very, very much for being here. This is the biggest live feed I've had yet, and it has been very, very much appreciated that you joined in. And I will see you again soon. Here's to your good health. Cheers.